Everyone knows that everything you touch stinks. Everything you touch breaks. Everything you touch becomes toxic. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today I'm here with another video, and racism in this one runs deep. Let's dive into it.
Bruges is a good example of the European garden. Yes, Europe is a garden. We have built a garden. Everything works. It's the best combination of political freedom, economic prosperity, and social cohesion that the humankind has been able to build. The three things together. And here Bruges is maybe the good representation of beautiful things, intellectual life, well-being. The rest of the world, and you know very well, Federica, is not exactly a garden.
The rest of the world is not a garden. He's failing to mention that that garden that he's speaking of invaded the rest of the world, murdered people, stole their resources and their wealth. Now, the social cohesion he's talking about, the rest of the world had their own social life. They had their own way of life until you invaded them, until Europe and the European nations invaded the rest of the world.
The rest of the world, most of the rest of the world, is a jungle. And the jungle could invade the garden. And the gardeners should take care of it.
This is just the projection of what they did. This is how guilty people talk. They project their guilt so that you think that they're the victims. But really, the rest of the world knows that Europe are the invaders. The rest of the world knows that the Europeans are the thieves and murderers who murdered people to gain wealth. They didn't care who they hurt. They didn't care what family they broke apart. They didn't care if they destroyed other people's culture. No, their main intention was, I'm going to get the wealth out of these people and I'll just leave them there. And that's what the rest of the world knows Europe for. They don't know them for social cohesion. Nah.
Should take care of the garden, but they will not protect the garden by walls, by building walls. A nice small garden surrounded by high walls in order to prevent the jungle coming in is not going to be a solution, because the jungle has a strong growth capacity.
Now, when people from the rest of the world are moving into Europe, it's seen as invasion, right? But when they were doing it, they didn't see it as such. They saw it to be a good thing. But people migrating to Europe, it's not that they want to go to Europe. Nobody wants to leave their country. Nobody wants to leave their family and friends to go to Europe. This is the consequence of what they did to those people. It's the consequence of what they did to the culture and the social life of the people who are moving to Europe. You come to someone's land, you steal their resources, you kill their people, you destroy anything that they valued, then they become poor. The logical thing is they will always move to where their resources are. So now people from the rest of the world or from the jungle are moving into Europe because they know Europe has resources that they stole from them. It's a simple example is in Europe, they have museums, and in those museums, they are displaying African artifacts that they stole. And in the process of stealing those artifacts, they killed people, murdered people, and they are displaying those artifacts in their museum, making profit out of them. They didn't make them, they stole them.
Capacity and the world will never be high enough in order to protect the garden. The gardeners have to go to the jungle. The Europeans has to be much more engaged with the rest of the world.
The hypocrisy in this one is deep too. He doesn't want the jungle to move into Europe, but he wants the European to go into the jungle. Why don't you stay in the garden where you are safe? Why don't you just stay in your garden and enjoy the stolen goods that you stole from the jungle, right? Nobody wants to engage with you after everything that happened, after the legacy that you left behind after the colonialism. Nobody wants to engage with you. Everyone knows that everything you touch stinks. Everything you touch breaks. Everything you touch becomes toxic. The rest of the world knows that you will turn brother against brother, communities against communities, just for your own benefit. We've seen this in the former huge colonies, where France wants to have total control of their natural resources of their former colonies. But in doing so, they may create conflicts to distract those people so that they can keep on stealing their resources. But people now are standing against that. People are protesting for Europe to get out of the jungle.
Otherwise, the rest of the world will invade us by different ways and means. Yes, this is my most important message. We have to be much more engaged with the rest of the world.
This is a scared man speaking. He thinks that people will invade them because they invaded people. No one wants to invade you, Mr. Borrell. Nobody will want to invade. They just want their resources back. They want their stolen goods back. Give them back their stolen goods and stop interfering with their internal affairs, and nobody will move to Europe. No one will move to Europe if you stop interfering and exploiting the jungle. It's just simple like that.
We are privileged people. We built a combination of these three things: political freedom, economic prosperity, social cohesion, and we cannot pretend to survive as an exception.
Before you invaded the rest of the world, there was social cohesion. A simple example is in Africa. You find Africa, we have more than 2,000 tribes. How do you think those people existed? How do you think those people related to each other? They traded with each other. Of course, there was conflict. Like you will expect everywhere where you find people, there will always be conflict. But at the end of the day, there was that social cohesion that people knew that I will depend on this person to provide me with that specific thing, specific need. So there was always social cohesion until you invaded the people and turned them against each other for your own good.
It has to be a way of supporting the others, facing the big challenges of our time. So thank you, Federica, for hosting this experience, this pilot program of a diplomatic academy. And I am happy, by the way, it's going to be in the net, it's going to be transmitted.
The only people who ask that question at the people, at the evil people. Because if you're saying the truth, then why are you afraid that it's going to be broadcasted to the world? Are you afraid? Because now, if this is what he speaks in front of the camera, what happens behind closed doors? It's just a question, I guess.
So let's take care then. Let's take care, because there are things that can be said in a closed doors and in inside working.
Can I just say that the European Union and the EU, the Europeans, they're in no position of lecturing anyone about democracy. They're in no position to do that. Because when people are trying to exercise democracy, they are always there. Their involvement in other people's democracy is known. So they're in no way fit to lecture no one about democracy, because they do not respect democracy.
And maybe cannot be projected to the jungle. To the jungle. Let's stay in the garden, but be aware that the jungle is listening to us.
Afterwards, we'll have a separate garden.
Good. Then
I hope when they have a separate, that the one that's not being broadcasted to the world, they will tell their students that the wealth that Europe has is a stolen wealth. That everything they think that it's valuable, they stole. And when they were stealing, they murdered people. And in that process of stealing, they destroyed other people's cultures. I hope that's what they're telling the students in these institutions that they are speaking of. Well, that's it for this video. I'll put the link of the full speech in the description below. And if you're new here and you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. And until next time, take care.